So a pleasant good morning, everyone, and welcome to the lab aspect of the urinary system and urine analysis. So when we think about urine, some of the measures which are often used to determine the composition of urine relates to three things, normally the electrolyte balance, water, and acid-base balance. During the lecture, we were able to see that the acid-base balance, this is actually regulated by the bicarbonate ions which are secreted by the kidneys themselves. Water balance, again, from the kidney, and specifically as it relates to that, porosity of the collecting tubule as related to secretion of ADH, antidiuretic hormone, from the posterior pituitary gland. Electrolyte balance, of course, this is regulated through the absorption of the different ions. And we looked at that when we were having discussions related to the kidneys themselves. And in terms of those electrolyte balance, of course, tubular reabsorption and secretion accounts for that electrolyte balance. So, urinary system. Urinary system subdivided into two major functional divisions, the kidney and the excretory passages. Kidney, major function, of course, manufacture of the urine, and the excretory passages, the ureters empty to the bladder, and of course, the bladder empties via the urethra to the external area. So here we see the kidneys again. Here's the main vein associated with the kidney. Main vein to the heart, which carries the clean blood, and then the main artery from the heart, which brings the blood wastes, from the heart brings blood, which has the waste. So then this blood, which is the renal artery, goes to the kidney itself, it's cleaned, and then returned via the inferior vena cava to the heart itself. Then it enters the systemic circulation. Of course, the adrenal glands, which sit atop both of the kidneys. Here you have the right kidney emptied by the ureter. And of course, this is muscular, the muscularis, which runs inside of the ureter, and that is to facilitate the passage of urine, regardless of what position we are sitting in. So that is important, because if we didn't have that muscularity associated with the ureters, we would not be able then to fill our bladders, if we were in the quote unquote wrong position. Here we have nerves, of course, the detressor nerve, the detressor muscle associated with the bladder. This is what voids the bladder itself. And then, of course, here we have the internal external sphincters leading to the urethra. These nerves tell the brain that the bladder is full, which allows the contraction of the detressor muscle and the relaxation of the internal and ideally the external sphincter. The external sphincter, however, through potty training, we have been able to override that involuntary control of the external sphincter muscle. So now we have voluntary control of it, which is why we could quote unquote hold in our pee. So the kidney, in terms of its composition, it's a paired organ. And why is it paired? One word. Why do we have two of them? They begin with B. Eat, 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 eat. Back up. Yeah, very good. Right, so that is critical. Having that backup, because in the event something goes wrong with one. And how do we know that it's okay, to have just one kidney? What examples do we have? What two examples come to mind? How do we know we could survive with just one kidney? From real life examples then.
Well, so from persons who would have had one removed or donated one.
Right, so we know, for instance, kidney donation, that's something that is very real, where one person would donate a kidney. So therefore, that shows then, yeah, you could live with one kidney, right? And any real life examples of persons with one kidney or who had most of their kidney removed? I thought somebody was going to tell me, well, cousin Alfred
So
had
the
it.
bishop
Yeah.
person you were telling me about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the head of the Catholic Church here, yeah, Pope Francis, he had a disease. He actually had an infection, a kidney infection. That was before the advent of antibiotics came to the fore. So therefore, back then, when you did get infection, it could lead to destruction of tissue damage. So he had a significant portion of his kidney removed. So for all intents and purposes, he has one kidney, and right now he's well into his 80s, and he had that infection when he was in his 18 or 19 years old. Okay, so kidneys located lateral to the lower thoracic vertebra and superior lumbar vertebra. Is your kidneys closer to the dorsal region or your ventral region? So is it closer to your back or to your belly in terms of the location of the kidneys?
Back.
Yeah, it's to your back. For those of us who watch boxing or maybe even MMA, that fighting, mixed martial arts, there's a illegal punch. You know, when you're like, if you're hugging somebody, right, and then you punch them in the back, you know, that's a highly illegal punch. If you watch boxing, or if you do follow boxing as well, you'll see it. You're not allowed to punch when you're hugging or clenched, because what you do, if you cuff somebody to the back, you know, while you're clenched, you're actually hitting their kidneys. It's known as a kidney punch, and it's a sucker punch. It could cause damage to the kidneys. And in fact, a little FYI, if ever it is, you know, you're in a fight or a brawl, and you grab somebody, that's a I sometimes use. It could deceive, you know, it pains when you do it a blow to that back area. So I'm not advocating fighting by any means, but do keep that in mind, you know, in terms of that sucker punch, that cuff to the back area or the dorsal region, and that when you do cuff there, you're hitting your kidneys. So the parts of the kidneys, these are the parts outlined here, and it's best to see them when you look at it from a diagrammatic perspective. So this is the cortex. How do you remember the cortex? C is for cortex, right? It looks very much as we've seen here, right? So when you look at it here, it looks very much like the letter C. So this is the cortex, and these regions are known as the medulla, and the papilla are the tips of this medullary region. They empty then into the major calyx as shown here, which then empty into the pelvis, renal pelvis. Collectively, the calyces enter into the pelvis and then into the urethra itself. Note the arteries and veins, renal arteries and veins. These are the major blood supplies to the kidneys. Let's see how they look from a live perspective. So this specimen shown here, this is what it looks like in terms of a kidney in section. So here we are seeing the cortex shown around here, cortex. C is for cortex, and these are the different arteries and veins associated with the arcuate region. This is the calyx, as we mentioned, and here this would be the urethra in section. So this, if you close it back, then you would see it actually going down, and as we know, the urethra goes to the bladder, which then voids to the urethra, to the external environment. All right, so question, why is the right kidney slightly inferior to the left? So in other words, why is the right kidney lower than the left one? So it's for an organ. It doesn't make sense. I teach, you all know everything. Good answer, Khadija, and you're quite right. So in order to accommodate the liver, the right kidney is actually lower than the left. Do you know of any other organ where, you know, in order for accommodation, one is lower than the other one as well? Have any other
The
organ?
heart and the lungs.
The lungs, right. So the heart and the lungs, right? Those are other examples. But for your kidney, do remember the right kidney, it accommodates in the back here. This is where your liver goes. So the glomerulus, right? Glomerulus is that capillary bed that filters blood to form the filtrate. So the glomerulus, when you think about the Bowman's capsule and you have that, you know, the winding up where the afferent arteriole enters into the Bowman capsule, and you know it gets all of those small, it gets smaller. That's where you have filtration occurring. Of course, the afferent then goes to the efferent, but this is where filtration, and that filtration very much could be paralleled to when you're making your sorrel. So you have your sorrel in the strainer and you have to push down on it. Very key to the functioning of the kidneys is pressure filtration. So that pressure buildup that occurs in the kidneys, that could be likened to your hand pressing down on the soil in order to get that waste out. Very important to note, however, blood is not a normal component of your urine. And if you do see blood in your urine, does it mean something is wrong with your kidneys? If you see blood in the urine, does it mean something is wrong with the kidneys? Comments. What do you have to say about that? So you see blood in your urine, and immediately you're saying, oh God, nearer my God today, I'm in death's waiting room. I'm in death's
I don't
waiting
think I
room, my
don't think
kidney's gone.
that's
Mhm.
necessarily wrong. I don't think it might be necessarily wrong, but you know, it might possibly. I want to
It could
believe
be.
it might,
So,
from an infection or injury
right. So there's
also.
a, right.
So
So
you also did mention if we eat beetroot, we could see a little tinge
yeah,
of the
yeah,
blood
yeah. So always have to be careful with
in our
beetroot.
urine. Yes.
Yeah, so beetroot does give the tinge. And the other thing to remember, if you were to step back, both of you all are quite right in your summations. So it means that there's a possibility. But one of the things we have to remember is this. So the blood could come from somewhere else. And I say, for some odd reason, the mother, let's say, wanting to be devil's advocate, you had a damage to the external or internal sphincter, causing bleeding at this point. Yeah, you'd see blood. So in other words, then, while you're seeing the urethra voids to the outside via the urine, and you are seeing blood, it doesn't mean all along here. Remember there, you have muscle all inside here as well. It could be from somewhere else. So it doesn't, from the time you see blood, it doesn't immediately mean that the blood is coming from the kidney, because there are other structures that could bleed into the space in which urine runs, right? But usually it's a high probability that it is. But don't rule out that it could come. So immediately when you see blood, oh God, this is it. Oh, I'll go and meet my grandpa. No, if your grandfather has passed, that is not necessarily the case. But it does mean to investigate, most definitely, to see where indeed it's coming from. Okay. All right, so we mentioned these in terms of the functionality of different parts. The glomerulus, which is a capillary bed, it filters the renal tubule. It receives, and modifies the filtrate, right, to form the urine. The glomerular capsule, also known as the Bowman's capsule. Why do they call it Bowman's? What does Bowman tell you? What do you think more likely than not? The fact that it has the name Bowman on it.
Was named after the person probably discovered
Yeah,
it.
correct is right. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, if you spend all that time in the lab, yeah, you'd want to name yourself, put your name onto something. Proximal tubule, that is where you have the maximal reabsorption. And as we looked at during the lecture, the proximal tubule, that is the region immediately after the Bowman's capsule. You have the proximal tubule. So therefore, opening of channels there for selective reabsorption of sodium and potassium ions through active transport mechanism. So therefore, they're moved against the concentration gradient from the filtrate that is going through the urethra. And that's how you reabsorb, depending on the body's needs, reabsorb these ions. Nephron loop of Henle, right? That's all the way down. And in terms of the loop of Henle is really a turning point from the short to the long arm. It contains both the ascending and the descending and the ascending loops, and it creates this osmotic gradient. That osmotic gradient is important because, as we've learned from SnF1 and from some of the other courses, osmosis, movement of things, and in this case, we're looking at ions from its area of high concentration to low. Why does it move from high to low? Energy requirements. It is indeed energetically more feasible to move from high to low. Parallel to that, think about High Street when you're moving from Library Corner all the way down to Courts down at the bottom of High Street or down to the wharf where the bus terminus is. It's easier to walk down as opposed to walking up from the bus terminus up the Library Corner, right? You expend more energy in that regard. So the nephron, we just mentioned this, the distal tubule. Well, no, we mentioned the proximal area for maximal reabsorption, but the distal, you have regulated sodium, potassium, and acid reabsorption occurring in that region. The collecting duct, regulation of water absorption. And again, this is under the control of what hormone regulates water reabsorption in the collecting duct? 3 letters. A dark horse.
ADH.
ADH, very good, right? Antidiuretic hormone. And a diuretic, as we mentioned, diuretics, a class of drug that make you want to urinate. And so therefore an antidiuretic would stop the urination. So if you're not urinating as much as it relates to volume, I mean, you're keeping in the water. So that's what antidiuretics do. They help you keep in the water. One of the things back in the day before they had really antidiuretics, one way in which you could prevent yourself from urinating a lot, anybody knows? It's a very simple thing. It's something you take, you find it in the kitchen. If you take high amounts of this, it will actually prevent you from urinating. It's something that you use a lot. In fact, whenever you're cooking, it's made in Greece. You can't cook without this.
Salt?
Salt,
Yeah.
yeah, salt, right? So back in the days, you know, in fact, with marathon runners, a person used to run long distances. You know, they didn't have it as it's set up now. When you look at marathons, let's say on TV, you know, it have water stations, you know, nice where people with cup and different things to hand out ever so often. I didn't have that. It's like, okay, we're running a marathon, go. The persons used to carry the water, or they would have what are known as salt tablets, which in essence is salt. They just swallow it, and that would actually keep them prevent, you know, urine from coming out. So they'll keep it for the duration of it. So salt tablets, very good for when if you don't want to urinate, is taken in. So this is just showing the areas in terms of the flow of blood out of the glomerulus, or out of the glomerulus, so filtration occurs here. And then you have selective reabsorption, as we mentioned, due to the setting up of different concentration gradients. So you have the reabsorption of ions occurring in the proximal. This is the proximal area here, goes down, and let me just make sure I'm following. Yes, it comes here, comes down. This is the proximal region. And over here is the distal. Oh, the arrows are really for the flow of blood. That was throwing me off. Yeah, so the arrow showing the flow of blood through the capillaries as they surround the descending and ascending loop, right? So when you do have this passage here, you have selective reabsorption of the ions occurring due to the setting up of concentration gradients. So you have now the movement of ions out of the urine and back into the blood. That is important. And then of course, all of these connect to the afferent arteriole, shown here, the afferent arteriole, and then ultimately it goes to the renal vein, and then to the inferior vena cava, into the heart, and via the aorta, then is distributed into the systemic circulation. So this is there showing it again from the area, the afferent arteriole, bringing the blood, and like the sorrel strainer, it is strained, right? The waste go out, and the blood now is flowing, right? So the blood, but even though it's flowing and the waste have gone through into the descending loop, you have selective reabsorption depending on the needs of the body. So if you need to increase sodium uptake or potassium uptake, you could now have reabsorption occurring because of the crisscross of this efferent arteriole around the descending and ascending loop. Once those ions are reabsorbed, they come back in as an afferent arteriole, and they now form the renal vein. Here it is, you have the urine devoid now of most of any ions which have to be taken up by the body itself. And now the urine collects in the distal collecting duct, and ADH, antidiuretic hormone, it affects the porosity of this. So if it is, we want a more concentrated urine. So in that case, that's when we do have a lot of water, ADH is released, opening pores such that water is released. This area around here, this is the area within the kidney itself. So therefore the water is ultimately reabsorbed into the blood, and that is how we actually retake the water into our system. So as a result of ADH secretion, the kidneys reabsorb water, and the urine is more darkened and concentrated, and the volume is less as opposed to when it's when you're looking at a normal situation. All right, so here we're looking at the renal blood flow, and this is just showing the parts as it goes through from the arcuate to the interlobular, afferent, arteriole, glomerulus. So the afferent, this is leaving the glomerulus, and then the efferent, this is one that drains the glomerulus itself. And these are just showing them these structures in a little more detail. So from the renal artery, it goes to the segmental artery, interlobular, the arcuate, interlobular, and the afferent arteriole, afferent, glomerulus, efferent, right? So the efferent, how to tell the difference? Well, E comes after A, or effluent is another word which is, in terms of removal, effluent means waste. So the efferent takes the blood away from the glomerulus. It then goes through to these regions, and ultimately it collects and goes to the renal vein. From the renal vein, inferior vena cava to the heart, to the lungs via the pulmonary artery, then returning to via the pulmonary vein, oxygenated, then to enter the systemic circulation. So the urethra is very important. The collecting ducts drain into the calyces, which then go to the pelvis, then into the urethras themselves. The urethras are the tubes that transport urine from the kidneys into the bladder. So the urethras go to the bladder, the urethras voids the bladder. And what does the bladder do? It's just a temporary storage. You have these rugae or folds in it, and that allows for the expansion of the, just as we mentioned, it looks like those little ice packs, the old variety of the ice packs that actually take ice. So now we could expand. The urethral muscle is a layer of muscle in the bladder wall, and this facilitates expansion. When it is we get the urge to urinate, it's sends signals sent to the detrusor muscle that gives us that urge. You feel the urge to urinate, right? So it's the detrusor muscle that gets the impulse to contract, and that voids your bladder. So this is showing it again in section, the detrusor muscle, and notice the rugae, these are the folds. So of course, when your bladder is filled, right, it allows for the expansion, facilitates expansion. Here it is. What gland is this one that surrounds the urethra?
Prostate.
Prostate. So therefore, is this a male or a female?
Male.
Yeah, male. Right. So females don't have prostates. Very important to take note of. Or let me rephrase that in terms of absolutes. In the medical literature, and as far as medical science has seen, females do not have prostates. So the urethra, these are the tubes that drain urine from the bladder to the external. And the internal, you have two, the internal and external. Internal, involuntary. The external, this is voluntary one. So this is showing here, again, the detrusor muscle, the ureters. This is the neck of the bladder, the urethra, and this is where you have the internal sphincter muscle, and this is the external sphincter muscle. Right, and again, this is showing the two, the ureter, the smooth muscle, urethral opening, prostate glands, note for male and female. All right, so notice with males, the urethra is longer. So which one is more susceptible to bladder infections, males or females? Which one do you think and why?
Males. So the females, because of the shorter distance to the bladder?
Correct. Yeah, because the shorter distance, right? So the males, because of the fact this long distance, I think I probably see the person who said male, you're thinking that, okay, the urine, I think I see what you're saying. The urine could collect in this area. I should have clarified the statement. In a normal person with a functioning kidneys and no prior indication of infection, I should have prefaced the question with that, because I can see what you're saying, that, okay, let's say if it is, they do have some infection existing and there's swelling here because of the fact it's longer, well, they could have more urine staying there, which could lead to more infection. So I see what you were saying. The first person who said male, I understand what you're saying. I didn't preface the question by saying in a normally functioning males, male and female. I should have prefaced it that way. But yes, but because of the shortness, females are more susceptible. And of course, the proximity, the proximal location to both the vagina and the anus in particular. If you do have some type of yeast infection, it's easier for that infection to spread to the bladder region because of the shortness of the urethra in the females. Urine, right, contains water, electrolytes, and nitrogenous waste from protein metabolism. Of course, urea, uric acid, ammonia, and creatinine, all of these things present there. In terms of the composition of urine, specific gravity of water is 1, and urine varies from 1.003 to 1.016. It is measured by an instrument called a urinometer, and it depends on the amount of solute. So when you're dilute, you're closer to the 1, and when it becomes more concentrated, the number goes up. So that's the final thing we want to look at in terms of the flow. I was saying past tense of flow is flu. Very special indeed. Not true. All right, so let's get back on track. Urine flow from the collecting duct, calyces, renal pelvis, the ureters empty into the bladder, which then empty into the urethra. The internal sphincter under involuntary control, but fortunately for us, we have control of the external. In most time, persons who have been potty trained then, or who have that ability, because there are some persons who don't have the ability to be potty trained, right? So they don't have that so they do have issues relating to incontinence as it relates to the bladder, urethra, and then of course to the external urethral orifice. So this is it here, your kidneys, urethra, down to your bladder, and voiding, of course, to the urethra. All right, so that's it for the lab lecture. Want to do one more thing before we go. Let's have a look at this. Let's revisit. Let's have a look at. Let's have a look at a little. Let's see how well we know our kidneys. Yes. What are your kidneys? The needs, and here we go. All right, we ready? We all ready? If we're ready, let me hear you say, yeah.
Yes.
Let me see a raise hand. For all those who ready, raise your hand. We all know if it was a fet, everybody, rag in the air, rag in the air. All right, we don't have any icon for rag in the air, so we'll just take the raise hand. Okay, let's go. Number 1. Let's see if I could blow this up because it's kind of free. I know somebody mentioned, yeah, this morning, yeah, they have it small. Okay, let's go. Okay, I think I blew it up too big. If I can get rid of this one. Okay, okay. I blew it up too big. Okay, question number 1. What's the number 1 job of your kidneys? Let me see some hands and I will heal you out. Let me see some hands who want to answer this one. What's the number 1 job of the kidney? Anessa, go ahead.
Get rid of waste.
To get rid of waste. Let's have a look, see. All right, Anessa, and you are correct. Yeah, well done. Right, it have a lot of work to do. They remove waste and excess fluids from your body. Very good. They produce hormones as well that make red blood cells. No, what's the hormone that make red blood cells again? And it rhymes with erythropoietin. Kiran, yes? Oh, you were just clapping there. What's the hormone that's erythropoietin? Yeah, so that's the one that is produced, and that stimulates the hematopoietin or the stem cells present in your bone marrow to produce red blood cells. Very good. Let's go to the next one. So each kidney is about what size? What's the size of a kidney? I have no idea. Somebody want to help me out? Okay, Sophia, go ahead.
A fist.
A fist, one way to find out. Well done, it is, right? So most of people have two, and they're located at the bottom of a rib cage on either side of your spine. Let's go to the next one. And let me see if we could get 12. Let's see if we could get 12 unique people to answer, all right? How much blood do you filter every day? Let me see if we could get another hand. And thanks for the 2 persons who answered previously. Let's see if we could get some new people. So we get 12 new people to answer. How much blood do you think you filter every day? Kieran, go ahead. All right.
1 gallon, sir.
What is it saying? It's
1
saying
gallon.
200 quarts. 200
I
quarts
get
is the answer.
I get it wrong.
Oh, okay, not wrong, because I have to applaud you for actually standing up and giving it. And oftentimes you think about it, you know, because the kidney is so small that it's just a little bit, but over time, in the course of a day, isn't this absolutely mind-blowing? 200 quarts. Jeez Louise. Wow. How much is 200 quarts to liters? Let me see if I could run that conversion. Because really we deal in, let's see, quarts to liters. Quarts to liters, L-I-T-R-E-S. Right? So it is 0.95 of a liter. So therefore, if you were to do that, my 95 by 200, right? So that's 190 liters. So imagine 100 and very close. What number we looked at this morning? That was very close to that. That was 180. What was that related to? And it was our good friend who actually told us that one. We look at the number 180 this morning. Thank you, Ron. We were looking at 180, and that was related to what? You know, I remember.
I was saying about the pressure.
Correct, right? So, right, you're relating it to 120 over 80, correct? And that 180, remember, we spoke about it this morning in terms of the volume of blood that's actually run through the kidneys, right? So that's a nice way to remember 200 quarts. And maybe the quarts threw you off. You're so accustomed to liters, right? So it was 180 liters. And what does the number, did the number 2 refer to again? I forgot this morning when you're looking at blood. Volume. Thanks, Aliyah. Right? The volume of urine that is produced. Yes, approximately 2. Let's go on to the other one. Well done, Kieran. Well done there in terms of your answering. If this happens, something may be wrong with your kidneys. Let me see. There's a hand. Amira, go ahead.
Probably peeing a lot.
Peeing a lot. Let's have a look. See, yeah, right? People with kidney disease, but as things get worse, are changing bathroom habits. So you might feel tired and these other things, lose your appetite. And peeing a lot is associated in particular with what disease, well, condition? It begins with D.
Diabetic.
And is known as the sugar. Thanks very much there, Bina, right? It's known as the sugar. Some people say the sugar. And why do they say the sugar? Why is it called diabetes the sugar? Well, because, quote unquote, your urine actually tastes sweet. Right? So, you know, please, but it does, because the sugar is actually released in the urine itself. And so why is one way, if you talk to some of the old people, how would they say that they could detect if somebody have sugar in the urine? You know,
Sometimes the smell and also could be
the smell is one way, correct, Bina? And another way, you know, these old people very observant. You'd see something.
So
Does this follow the urine, they say?
What is that? Go ahead. So if you look at yes, there you go. That's the one. And I think Charles wanted to say the same thing as well. So what they'd say is, like, if they have it, you know, if the person gets up in the night and urinate, and how when they go in the toilet, they see how a trailer ants, you know, going to the toilet. Because, well, of course, in urination, particularly with males, you know, sometimes you would drop some urine outside of the bowl. So sometimes you would see these ants, you know, around the bowl and so on. And that's an example, because the ants are attracted to the sugar. And so that was one example of how they would know or detect it. Very good. Thanks for sharing that. Let's go. We're almost there. All right. If your kidneys stop working. Yeah, go ahead.
So, but even so, if you're drinking plenty of water, so that can, that can be That can be the problem that uranium plenty.
Yeah, okay, good point. We looked at that this morning when we were talking about it in the lecture. The function of the kidneys, yes, is to regulate water content, right? And as we mentioned, 180 liters, approximately 2 liters. So going 5 to 6 times during the course of the day, quote unquote, that's normal. One of the other things that the kidney does, if it is you taking too much water, it will cause you to, quote unquote, urinate or micturate, right? The proper term is micturation. Micturation refers to urination or cause you to pee, as it were. So yes, if it is you do taking a lot of water, you will pee more. And it could, again, if it is then you want to draw a parallel, but let's say somebody who is diabetic, who's always going then to the bathroom, you could get confused in that regard. So which is why it's always good whenever you see a particular condition, think about it. I'm seeing red in my urine. Is it blood? But wait a minute, I had beets for lunch. Could it be that some of the, the beet is actually filtering? Could be. If it is I've drunk a lot of water today. Could it be then the reason I'm going to the bathroom is because of that and my kidneys are actually working properly? Yeah. So that is a possibility. That's a very good question you asked there. And yes, if you drink a lot of water, you will visit the bathroom more than usual. Okay. If your kidneys stop, I don't know if I answered a question there, Kieran, did I? Suhan, you have a question? Go ahead. Wait, what did
No, I wanted to answer.
Oh, okay. If your kidneys stop working, what you might get, go ahead.
I'll choose either one.
Either one. Let's see if that is right. It doesn't make sense. I teach you all know everything. Very good. In terms, you could either be when you can't filter you anymore, these things build up. So you either need a new kidney or to go on dialysis. Anybody here know of any relative or anything like that who had to go on dialysis? I want to speak about how long they go and how frequent per week. Anybody who wants to share that information?
So I don't know if anybody personally, but I have worked around
Yes.
it a little bit,
Yes.
and I know that they have well, it depends on how bad what stage the patient is at, because some of them have they have like a 3 week shift or a 4 week shift. Some of them do the peritoneal, you call it,
Yeah.
dialysis,
Yes.
and that type of thing, and they do it, for a period of about 5 to 7 hours. I think they had to sit down in this chair and
Yeah.
the device, the blood comes out, it goes into this tubing and then into some distilled water solution, something, then it goes back into the body. Really amazing
Yes.
thing.
And
Really
yes,
amazing.
and it makes you appreciate what your kidney does even more when you see then what
Oh
happens
yes.
when it's
Oh
not working.
oh yes. Oh yes.
You know?
Oh yes.
Very true. And
Oh yes.
sometimes, as you rightly put, in terms of the frequency, with some persons is 3 times, I think 2
One
to
of
3
the
times a
things that I
week.
noticed, one of the things I noticed with them is that when they finish with this dialysis process, their blood pressure tends to be really low. Really, really low.
Yes. It tends to be lower. All
So,
right.
so another thing with the dialysis patients is the enlarging of the vein that they do dialysis through.
Yeah, what they call it, when they put with some persons, what they call that, when they, because with some of them they actually put the tube in, yes.
Yes, sir. I can't remember the
Oh
exact
gosh,
name
I
right
forget
now.
the name. But yes, but yeah, it is enlarged. Yeah, and in fact, infection. Back to our bad word in medicine. Yes, they have to work on it to keep the infection away. That is because it's very easy to get infected, for it to get infected, and that is another issue there. So keeping it clean is of paramount importance. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. All right, let's go. All right, 6 more. A common cause of kidney disease is, let me see a new hand now. What's a common cause of kidney disease? Charles, go ahead.
So diabetes.
Diabetes, all right. Right. Is high blood pressure a cause of kidney disease as well, Kieran? You're
Yes,
quite
sir.
right. Yes. So
Also, I've been
what are
to
they
both
saying?
there, both of them.
Both, yeah, good.
Right. As the Calypsonian Sparrow said, both of them, both are in a totally different context, of course, but both of them, both of these things could cause kidney disease, right? So very important to take note of that. Right? Some blood pressure drugs, which are ACE inhibitors, can help protect from disease, right? Angiotensin converting enzymes. This is secreted, of course, by the lungs and acts on angiotensin 1, converting it to angiotensin 2, and then angiotensin 2 has those effects, right, of raising the blood pressure. So therefore, when you have ACE inhibitors, right, that could actually regulate this high blood pressure because there's a normal cycle for keeping the blood pressure up. All right, so that's why ACE inhibitors are used to control when you have high blood pressure. Prevents then the conversion of angiotensin 1 to 2. And so the effects of angiotensin 2 does not take hold. And the effects of it, vasoconstriction, and also the other things associated with it. All right, good. Next one. You can live with, well, let me see some new hands now. And I know who answer already. Let me see a new hand.
Yes, sir.
Could you live with one kidney?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, very good there, Judith, right? Let's see if that is so. You put true, yeah. And thousands of people donate kidneys all the time, right? It's the most commonly donated organ. And some people are born with one kidney, right? And of course, if one is missing or damaged, the other one can grow larger to become nearly the size of, well, knock me over, right? To become nearly the size of 2, and that helps it do the job of both. That's rather interesting. So when you have one, the other one physically would increase in size. That's interesting to note. We're almost there. A donated kidney, let me see some new hands, could come from a living person, someone who has just died, or both. Let me see some new hands. All right, everybody saying both? Yeah, both. So living donors, but somebody who has recently been deceased, right? What they could do is actually donate kidneys. I remember when I was, I do know in the States, they have a situation in particular when you're renewing your license. So let's say the license costs $40 and there's a little box to tick, so that if in the event you died in a car crash, you give consent for your organs to be donated. And if you tick that box, you pay like $15 for the license, right? So I always found that was interesting, in terms of that. But over in the US, they have a very active organ donation system over there, a very well organized one as well. Even though there are thousands of people who are on the wait list for it, particularly for those needing kidneys as probably the #1 sourced organ from persons. But to get a discount on the renewal of your driver's, both your driver's license and your ID. So the reason why they have it, they do it for your driver's license. When you do get your driver's license as well, on the back, there's a box that that they tick or not that says I am an organ donor. So in the unfortunate event, let's say you do pass in a car accident or something like that, and let's say your next of kin cannot be notified or they haven't done so, they know they have the authorization to harvest your organs, for use in somebody else. Let's go. We're almost there. We reach question 9. Let me say, someone is added to the kidney transplant waiting list every 14 seconds, 14 hours, or 14 days. What do you think it is? As you mentioned, there are lots of people on the list. So which one do you think the answer is? Let's see, every 14 seconds. Yeah. And this is relating to the US population, right? Which is a very large population. And yeah, right? Showing more than 100,000 people on the kidney transplant list. It can be a long wait because the supply is so low. On average, imagine it takes about almost 4 years to get a new kidney. Unless, of course, you have a family member willing to donate it, right? So every 14 seconds. So that's why it's good to take care of your kidneys, drink water. When you're dehydrated, your pee is usually what? Clear, dark yellow,
Dark yellow.
Right? Some people say, I always remembered one time I was playing football and this guy came up to the coach. He was, "Coach, I went to the toilet and I peed like Golden Ray. What do you think happened?" I always remember just that, the imagery to think that the color of your urine is like golden ray, and that would be dark yellow, you know, in terms of the coloration. And that goes, well, yeah, drink more water. Always remember, dark urine, time to drink some water. We're almost there. Kidney stones about the size of a tennis ball. Is that true? Are they that large?
True.
Kidney stones. All right. I don't know if you remember from lecture this morning, but they're small. They're really small. They're about the size of a pearl. They kind of go small as a grain of sand or a golf ball. So it's not impossible, but it's very rare. Let's just say it about that. So usually, this question should really have been usually a kidney stone is the size of a tennis ball, and the answer is no. It's very, very rare. Nothing is impossible, but it's very, very rare. Because at that point, believe you me, you'd be in, before it gets to that stage, you will know. And you know, so that's right. And the last question, taking pain meds wouldn't affect your kidneys.
I will say false.
Yeah, I mean, correct. Oh. Yes, you're quite right in that regard. It is false. Things which go through all of those things, pain medicine, medications, right? They do, such as, well, some pain medicines, aspirin, ibuprofen, naproxen, can damage them if you take too much of them. So always remember, with medication, follow the prescribed dosage, and most critically also follow the instructions given by your doctor, and don't try to self-medicate or take drugs that you find around the house that somebody leaves because they finish, you know, and they just leave them there. All right. And that's where we'll stop our class for today. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Just one
Yes,
second.
sir.